Hello and welcome to Books and the World. I'm your host, Roger Smith. Books and the World is an interview show produced by the Cape Cod Writers Center and Cape Media Center. The Writers Center was established over six decades ago and sponsors a four-day writers conference every summer on Cape Cod. The goal of Books in the World is to show how writers, illustrators, publishers, editors, and others in the literary field play their roles in the world of books and other communications media. The show has been broadcast continuously since 1978, making it the longest-running program of its kind in the United States. Today, we are delighted to welcome author Rick Cochran to the show. Rick grew up in Wellfleet, here on Cape Cod, where his father was a school principal. Rick is a retired educator himself, who has written 6 books so far. His first 5 books are all set in Wellfleet in the old days of the 1950s. His murder mystery, Death at Bound Brook Pier, received a coveted starred review from Kirkus Reviews and was chosen as an indie book of the month. Rick's recent novel, True to His Country, has been 6 decades in the making. It is based on the lives of his great-grandparents during the Civil War. Rick, it is such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, Roger.
Welcome. Okay. E.L. Doctorow famously said, "The historian will tell you what happened, the novelist will tell you what it felt like." And I got to tell you, I think you split the uprights. You did an excellent job. Do you consider yourself more of a historian, or do you consider yourself more of a novelist?
I consider myself a storyteller.
Oh, good.
Which maybe splits right between the two of them.
You did it again.
Thank you,
yeah.
thank you, thank you.
Great. Well, at the very beginning of this very fascinating book, you used terms that I had to parse out a little bit. You said there's a difference between a fictionalized history and historical fiction. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Historical fiction traditionally is about a fictional character during historical times.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have Johnny Tremaine, hanging out with Paul Revere,
Sure.
and the Sons of Liberty. This is real people.
Uh-huh.
Almost all the characters in this book are real people that I researched, including my great-grandparents, obviously, and yet they talk with each other and they have things that happen, and I've had to fill in gaps, in their story, and so that's the fictional part, but it's borderline history.
Well, you did an excellent job of it.
Thank you.
As a writer of historical fiction myself, I have a general antipathy towards primary sources for 2 reasons. Number one, I can never figure out people's handwriting because first of all, they used approximate spelling and they didn't punctuate and they
Right.
just shorten words. And second, it takes me all day of reading letters to find the pearl that I really am looking for that is going to move my story along. But you obviously have a very different attitude. Tell me where that comes from.
Well, it comes from the story, and maybe I'll digress for a moment about, how this has been 6 decades in the making.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm avoiding your question, but I'll answer it.
We'll get there.
I was about 12 years old. It was around 1961. It was actually the 100th anniversary of the Civil War. And my Nana, my grandmother, came to live with us full time. And we were very close. She'd already come, she would come every summer and help take care of me in Wellfleet while my mother worked a summer job, waitressing or something, in the tourist economy. And so we were very close, and I remember sitting there, vividly remember, as she unpacked, and she got to the bottom of her suitcase, and she took out this little packet, and it had 2 envelopes, and they were tied in a lilac ribbon. And she showed them to me, and she said, "Did I ever show you these?" And I said, "No, what are they?" And she said, "Did I tell you my father fought in the Civil War?"
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, no. I can imagine the impact. And she said, "Well, here, go ahead and read them." So I untied the ribbon and I opened up the envelope, and these, yellowed letters that I have to this day.
Sure.
And I remember reading the beginning of it, and I'm just gonna, I know it by heart, but I'm gonna turn to this. At the beginning of the letter, and the handwriting was impeccable.
Oh,
No punctuation
you got
anywhere.
lucky. Oh, right. Of
But
course.
the handwriting was amazing. Okay. C.L. Taylor, 1862, on board New Brunswick, Roanoke Island, North Carolina, Feb. 13th, 1862. And I looked at Nana and I said, and then it said, "Dear Mr. Philly, dear sir." I said, "Who's Mr. Philly?" And she said, "Oh, well, that was my mother's, it was kind of like her foster father." She said, "Did I ever tell you she was an orphan?" I go, "No, you didn't tell me that. What happened?" She said, "Oh, her parents died on the ship from Ireland to America." And I said, "Well, how did she end up with Mr. Philly? Who's he?" She said, "Well, her father was in business with Mr. Philly, in the tobacco business. And so he became like their foster father. He and Mrs. Philly became like their foster father." So I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then she said, "Read the rest of the letter." So I read, and it said, "As we have had brush with what we call rebels and gave them one of the darndest whippings they have had, I seat myself to write you a few lines. You will read of the battle before you get this, I know, but I will not say anything about it, only that we have taken Roanoke Island, and it was so hot a time, Fen Foster says he never saw in the Mexican War so hot a one. It lasted 5 hours. The 10th Connecticut has won a name for itself that will follow it. Our colonel was killed, and Lieutenant Stillman was killed, and near 100 killed and wounded." And I kind of scanned down the rest of the letter, which I'd read in more detail later, but I got to the end, and I still get goosebumps when I read this even 60 years
It's an
later.
amazing letter.
Signed the letter, "From a soldier true to his country and your well-wisher, Charles L. Taylor." And I read that, and I knew that, I had to find out more about that. And about 60 years passed, or maybe more like 50, and the internet came along, and Ancestry.com came along, and other things that really made researching much, easier. And I set out to find the story behind Charles and Charlotte, the orphaned Irish girl, and the soldier. And the more I learned, the more fascinating and amazing the story of their lives became.
So we've really got two folks, your two grandparents. We've got Charles Lambert Taylor and his wife.
Charlotte Scales Taylor.
So and Charles has his own backstory.
Yeah.
So who was he before he met his wife, and who was he after he met his wife?
Well, the interesting thing is when I started to research things, and I call this serendipity, okay? And my advice to anybody who wants to find anything or write a book or whatever is go out there, look. I went to Bloomfield, Connecticut, which is where they were from, and I went to the cemetery, and I had found the headstones, beautiful, found information and other family members that I don't think my grandmother even knew existed.
Wow.
Like that her mother had an older sister that died 20 years before Nana was ever born of tuberculosis. I go to the Historical Society. First thing I walk in, and there's these two big portraits on the wall. And I didn't know who they were, but I knew. I still actually did know. I said, "That has to be Jay and Julia Philly." And the woman said, "Yes, how did you know that?" And I said, "They were the foster parents of my great-grandmother." She said, "We never knew she had foster children," so I told her the story. And she said, "Well, you might want to talk to Fred Hesketh. He just published this book last month, Bloomfield in the Civil War." So she calls Fred.
Talk about serendipity.
Fred says,
Holy
"I'll be
mackerel."
right down." Fred comes over, we chat about the book. I tell him the story about the connection to the Phillies. We find my great-grandfather in his book. And he says, "Well, you might be interested in Julia Philly's diary. It's in the Connecticut Historical Society." And I'm like, yeah, I'd be interested. So the next day, guess where I went? I went to the Connecticut Historical Society. I got Julia Philly's diary. And a quick anecdote about it. They bring me white gloves, and they come out with what looks like a cheese serving tray with these 1x2 little inch books, like 30 of them, each one representing a year. Now I've got these tiny books, and I'm there for the day, and I'm going to take notes, right, about Julia's diary, talk about primary documents.
Yeah, no kidding.
Lady says, would you like a magnifying glass? Well, yeah, that would help. So now I got the magnifying glass. I'm trying to go through this. Another woman came by and said, oh, you know what? Somebody put that on computer disk in a Word document. Would that help? Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
So they bring it out. We pop it in the computer. Now I can do a search on Taylor. I can do a search on Charlotte. I can do a search. I'm finding all this information about my great-grandparents because Julia Philly is talking about them. They stayed very close. They lived a half a mile from each other. And she talks about them in her diary all of the time. In fact, here's the amazing one I discovered. I realized that every time she mentions my great-grandfather, you asked about him, that there's a little sarcasm, like a little, I don't know, it's like,
I wonder about Taylor.
yeah, Taylor's home on leave. I hope he doesn't waste his bounty money like those some of the. There's always a little negative side to it. So she's not entirely approve of him. And then I'm reading one thing she says, he's home on furlough, been having trouble with his first wife. Boom. I'm thinking, I don't think Nana ever knew about that. Because my grandmother was born in 1882, 20 years after the Civil War, 12 years after her next sibling. Talk about surprise babies, okay? So there's a lot of family history she didn't know because it happened 20 years before she was ever born. So I realized, okay, well, maybe this is why Julia Philly is not crazy about Taylor. He's a divorcee.
So you had to fill in some backstory. You've got this very real great-grandfather. And you know some diary entries and so on, but you had to give him a little bit more life in 3 dimensions and so forth.
Yeah, well, you know, every story needs a villain. And in a way, the Civil War is the biggest villain in this piece.
For sure.
But a minor villain is poor Molly. I created this character, Molly,
Brilliant.
Who's his first wife and has a serious drinking problem. And, you know, it sort of traps him into a marriage on false pretenses, we shall say. And she keeps cropping up because she knows he's gotten money for enlisting. And there's one particular confrontation between Charlotte and Molly that I think, you know, was well done. I like that one.
I think it was magnificent.
Yeah, thank you.
You did such a good job of the way she was all sweet in the very beginning and then turned nasty when it was obvious she wasn't going to get what she wanted.
Right. When
Well
Charlotte
done.
stood up to her, all of a sudden she threw in her own Irish brogue, and then Charlotte's Irish brogue came out too. And the two of them kind of went at it.
Yeah, they did, and you drew that out very, very well.
Thank you.
Well done. Well, tell me, in your speculation, either real or your novelist hat, why do you think Charles went off to war?
You know, I think the way he signs that first letter that I have, you know, from a soldier true to his country. And what I did in the novelist way is I built into his backstory that he had mixed emotions about, you know, being divorced from Molly. On one hand, he knew, you know, what she was up to and that he'd been kind of trapped and that she was, you know, a liar and an alcoholic and so on. On the other hand, he still felt like somehow he'd failed, whether it was because he married her or because he, you know, divorced her or whatever, and that he felt he had some things to live up to. And so the way I created it was patriotism, it was loyalty. There was a financial aspect. People don't realize that the government, the states primarily, gave bonus monies for people for enlisting, right? Now you had to complete your term of service to collect the money, and you know, they found out quickly if they gave the money right away that often the people never showed up. They just took the money and ran. But yeah, so that's kind of the way I built the story. And the other thing is, my great-grandfather was wounded twice, survived typhoid fever, which probably could have gotten him out of the war, but he went back. What the union did is, the companies that signed up for 3 years, at the end of 2 years, they said, are you going to re-enlist? Because they didn't want to be surprised when everybody said, oh, I'm going home. They'd found that out with the 90-day enlistments at the beginning of the war. So Charles re-enlisted. So at the end of his 3-year enlistment, he was back again. And I thought, this shows real dedication, you know, because he didn't have to do it. He'd been 3 years. That could have been enough.
You also said that he, at that point, he would have been disappointed to have let his comrades down.
One of the things, I had a brief stint in Naval Reserve, and part of the training I went through was spend 3 weeks with the Marine Corps in an abbreviated boot camp. And I've always read a lot of military history. I've talked with and read a lot about veterans. And one of the things they all say is that once you're in combat, you feel a loyalty to the men with you. If you ever watched the show Band of Brothers, that was one of the things that many of them, you know, they're in the hospital, they're feeling like, I got to get back, they need me, you know, they're depending on me. And they develop such a bond that you feel, many of them feel that I have to be there, I have to see this through because everybody needs me.
Well, you've led me right into my next question, which is the way you describe battles, and I don't think I'm spoiling anything, but the description and the graphicness gets more intense as the novel progresses. In the very beginning, Charles isn't even sure he's killed anybody. He's shot his firearm from a distance, so maybe I hit somebody, maybe I didn't, I don't know. But to my mind, having never been in combat, you have described the fog, the uncertainty, the time compression, not having any idea what's going on around you, just kind of, okay, I'm in it, and I know the guy next to me, but that's it. Where did that come from? Well,
I think reading a lot of books, both histories and novels. I tell you, the 3 weeks I spent with the Marine Corps in 3 days of simulated battles. I remember when with 3-person fire team it was called, and we hear shooting and it was blanks, but they said don't go in the swamp because we're using live ammunition over there. Okay, I'm not going in the swamp. And everybody dove into the bushes and were crawling around in the pine forest of the James River in Virginia, and ironically, years later, my great-grandfather was there, and everybody's gone. I don't know where I can't see them anymore. They were here a second ago, and I crawl out, and there's a Navy SEAL who's pretending to be a Viet Cong, and he's standing there having a great time shooting his AK-47 in the air, and I take aim at him, and we've been warned, don't shoot if you're more than 10 feet close, because even though they're blanks, they hurt. And suddenly my mind said, is this 10 feet or is this 15 feet or whatever? So I hesitated. And he suddenly looked down and he saw me and I saw him. And I stuck my rifle in the air and I fired off a shot. And he smirked and laughed and waved at me. And he fired a shot in the air and then he ran off.
Oh my gosh.
But I thought, that's what, we were 24, then we were 3, and then it was just me. And this is just pretend. But this is, this is what it can be like. And when I've read the stories, the fog of war, and so I tried to convey that.
Well, you did a great job of it.
Thank you.
Well
Thank
done.
you.
And that gets me, you did mention the battlefield. How many times did you walk Roanoke Island and some of the other set
Well, it's
pieces?
Interesting because many of the battlefields have been carefully preserved, like New Bern, North Carolina, which was his second battle. Roanoke Island is more famous for the lost colony of Roanoke.
Yes, it is. And you snuck that in, by the way. Well done.
Being a history teacher, I had to slip in those history things. But if you want to see where the battle was, you have to go down to the junction of the 2 roads, and there's a kind of a mound of dirt, and there's a little plaque, and it says that was
and that's it.
And that's it. I went to battlefields that were very well preserved, Petersburg and Fort Gregg, and I went to places which were a Wendy's with a plaque in front of it. It's a variety, and yet I have to say, when you're writing, as you know, you start to inhabit your characters, and particularly when they're your ancestors. And I will do a little spoiler alert. I don't know if you're going to do a question on this. in his letters, Charles mentions two other men from Bloomfield, Foster Coombs and Gaylord Meacham. Now Gaylord, and so I worked them in as supporting characters throughout the book.
Yeah.
Gaylord Meacham was 19 years old. When they first enlisted, he was immediately made a corporal. He must have had militia background or something. And then less than a year later, he becomes a sergeant. Now, he did not re-enlist, and so at the end of his 3-year enlistment in October of 1864, he went home. So I'm thinking, okay, well, that's fine. As I'm researching and I'm going through the cemetery, I find his gravesite. And it says, you know, here he is. It said, died, age 23, February 1865. And I thought, that's like 3 or 4 months after he came home from the war.
Right.
So the poor guy, 23 years old, survives 3 years of bloody battles, comes home and dies. I don't know if he got sick or what happened to him, but you know, it's like, talk about irony. And when I found that out, it literally was like I was punched in the stomach.
Sure, because these are your characters. You know them at this point.
Yep.
That's just unbelievable. Now, 1862, this was a period in the North described as the history books. The North is getting its butt kicked.
Yeah.
But on the Confederate coast, with all the blockade and the battles that Charles is participating in, that's not so. How did you
an
reconcile
interesting thing,
that?
And I do want to mention, for folks who haven't read the book, you know, half the book is about Julia and Charlotte and about the home front and about, it's not all battles and not all war. But a former Union colonel, William Fox, became a Civil War historian after the war. And he rated all of the 3,000 Union regiments, however many it was. And he rated the 10th Connecticut, my great-grandfather's regiment, in the top 18% of effective regiments. Now, they weren't at Gettysburg, they weren't at a lot of the biggest battles, but what they did do was amazing in the battles they were in, and they were over you know, 20 or 30 battles that they fought in. So what made them so effective? I started to ask myself this question. So they were led by General Ambrose Burnside, a guy from Rhode Island.
Who's gotten a bum rap in history.
He has, you know, and he partly deserved it, but partly it's not his fault too. So he had this idea of forming this amphibious assault group, which would go down and take over Cape Hatteras area and Roanoke Island and help control the whole coastline, blockade it. And he said he was going to get New Englanders because they'd be good on ships. Well, of course, I don't know what they had to do about ships because, as I have my great-grandfather say in the book, hopefully the sailors are the ones who know about ships and they're sailing the ship, and the soldiers are mostly farmers and butchers and teachers and, you know, and tailors, and they don't know anything about the sea. But it turns out all they needed to know was how to get in and out of boats.
Sure.
But they had 2 months of training. Now, in the Civil War, once it started, people enlisted, they got a week of training, if that maybe, and then they were shipped off as fast as they could go, green as can be, not knowing what the heck they were doing, but not with the Coastal Division, of which the 10th was part. There were 12,000 men, 2 months of training. They go and they take Roanoke Island. 10,000 of their troops overwhelmed 2,000 poorly clad and
So
poorly...
they get one success under their belts.
Boom. Then they go to Battle of New Bern, North Carolina. 10,000 men drive off 4,000 Confederates. They take the city. Another victory. Okay, and this is when the Union was losing battles left and right everywhere else.
Right.
Unfortunately for Burnside, Lincoln made note of that, and he said, "I need a general who can win battles." He calls Burnside up, says, "I'm putting you in charge." And Burnside said, "I'm not ready for this. You know, I'm fine on this level, but not the whole army. I need you." So Burnside did it. Unfortunately, it was a disaster for a number of reasons I won't go into. But then after Burnside left them, the Coastal Division went up and they took the railroad bridge and junction at Goldsboro. So they had victory after victory after victory, and they became veterans who were confident, they knew what they were doing, and I think that's why they were so successful. And you know, we'll probably get into a couple of things they did that were just unbelievable. Should I go for them?
Sure.
Or okay.
Take it.
So The third major battle they were in was at Kinston, North
We
Carolina.
have about 3 minutes left. by the
Okay.
way.
I'm going to jump ahead. It's October 1864. Those who didn't re-enlist have gone. Everybody else is wounded or no longer. The 10th Connecticut, from original 1,100 men, is down to 100 men.
Ouch.
So there's a big battle as part of a larger battle, and the Confederates charge, and there's 2 full regiments in front of the 10th Connecticut. 100 men, they're the backup regiment. The 2 regiments panic and run. The Confederates start breaking through. The 10th, 100 men, stands up, opens fire on 2,000 Confederates, stopped
Stop
the
them
assault. Then they became the rear guard for an organized retreat. And General Gibbons said, the 10th Connecticut saved the Army of the James from disaster today. So, that was kind of an example of what they ended up doing.
Let me get back to the home front just very briefly. One of the quotes that I love from Charles is that he says to Charlotte, "If you marry me, then you marry my past as well." Where did that come from? Was that personal experience, or did that come out of your author or out of your novelist's brain?
That could probably be all of our personal experiences. But no, I thought that would be fitting, knowing that Julia didn't really approve of the marriage and that he'd been divorced, and that she might have to face up to those past indiscretions on his part.
Well, that's great. We're coming to our close here. Tell me, what's your attitude about artificial intelligence and how it's going to affect us as novelists?
I don't know. It's here, and we can't avoid it. But we'll see. The future is there. A lot of it I don't like, obviously, but I can't stop it. It's a tidal wave.
Yeah, it certainly is. All right, this has been absolutely the fastest half hour of my recent life. If you've enjoyed this video and would like to see more, you'll find links to them through our website, capecodwriterscenter.org, through our Facebook page, and on YouTube. And thank you very, very much for watching Books and the World. Rick, thank you so much. This has been terrific.
Thank you, Roger.